Anita here and welcome to day 13 of the Inktober challenge. Now today I wanted to do something different. I've been a little bit tired painting witches every day. It doesn't mean I'm not gonna, again, of course it's still Witchtober. But because it's Friday the 13th, I wanted to paint a cat, a black cat. So I've decided to go back to the idea of galaxy cats that I've painted a few days back. And also because I really felt like painting them again. I wanted to experiment a little bit more to see, what else I can do with that, with just those wet on wet ink washes. And so as you can see, I have a bit of a cat shape sketched in the background, and I made it very simple on purpose because I wanted to do some, as I've mentioned, the wet on wet inking. I wanted to do some swirls with ink, and so I figured, it would be easier on me if I have three, in this case three, but if I would have very distinctive shapes that I could make the wet washes in, just to make it a little bit easier on myself. So there is a head, there is the body, and there is the tail. There are three shapes. They are not, they can be disconnected, let's put it this way, from each other. And this really makes it easier for me to practice, not really practice even, it's just to experiment and to, not worry about shading and everything. I just wanted really to just play with ink and water and see where it takes me. So I'm starting the same way I've started my last Galaxy Kitten. I'm starting with a very, very, very diluted ink wash and just, dabbing it. I'm just dabbing it around, trying to make it look, like as if ink just spilled on the sheet of paper, but I don't know. I suppose I just want to blend it into the white without without having it feather in. I just wanted to have a bit of a shape. I actually like that much better than just letting the ink seep into the water wash. Basically what I'm doing right here, and I did it just to try it out. I wanted to drop in a few drops, a few little shapes of the bit darker watercolor, my goodness, ink wash, and I wanted to spread into the already existing shape. I didn't want it to be too harsh. And I'm just basically working on creating a bit of depth, just layering ink washes one after the other to get that bit of a depth going on. And one thing that I should have done was actually taping this to a board, to a wooden board instead of the foam board that I normally use, and using a bit thicker tape, because this thing just, it was so hard to use a heat gun, just because the tape, because this is just a regular washi tape, and it doesn't matter if I'm painting normally, but once the heat gun hits it once and the tape pops up, it's not gonna stick that well anymore. So it was a bit tricky to get the heating process, fast, because I work really with the heat gun in one hand, paintbrush in the other, really pretty much. I don't even let the ink sit too long. I just really need to dry it fast. Because my way of painting with ink is that I see, if I drop it like here, I'm working on a wet surface. So I'm dropping the ink and then I'm kind of swirling it a little bit, just trying to place it where I like it or have it flow where I like it. And then I make sure that once I see something, I just dry it immediately before the ink changes its mind and just goes somewhere else. So that's why I really I use the heat gun a lot while I paint. Well, I paint really on anything. I use it even on acrylic paint, because I just want to work fast. I'm not very patient when it comes to paint drying. So it was challenging to keep the heat gun away from the tape enough so that it wouldn't destroy the paper, because I don't like it when it buckles. I just didn't want to worry about that. So as you can see here, and I've decided to, some parts are more sped up than the others. This one isn't, because I wanted to show how I move the ink around. Maybe it's gonna help you, for those of you who are not that familiar with ink. I mean, I'm not familiar with ink that much, but I've painted a few times already. So I thought that, I can at least show what I'm doing. And it's really mostly trial and error. And if I don't like something, I'm pretty much just going to dry. Either I'm going to dab it off as much as I can with a tissue, or I'm just going to dry that layer and then come back with another layer like I'm doing over here, where I just dried it. As you can see, a lot of the black just went away because ink, I don't know if it's all the inks or it's just mine, but ink always dries a little bit lighter than what it appears on paper. And so sometimes I just don't see that there is not as much ink as I thought it would be, because there was quite a lot of water in the end. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm adding that pure black ink in the places where I wanted it to be. And then instead of smudging it with the paintbrush, I'm just tipping the board, the paper, just moving it around, tapping it onto the surface to have that ink move on its own. And I really like how that looks like. It's still gonna dry a lot lighter than it is right now, but by layering it like that, I get the intensity that I want. And here I'm being very, very courageous by adding black splatters. I really like splatters, and I try to do a lot more of them. Here is me adding fake splatters, by the way, because if you can't get the size of the splatter that you want, but you're afraid to splatter further, it's better to add a fake splatter. I really wanted to have a bit of a bigger dot, but I only have the smaller brushes here when I'm working with the ink. The other brushes are in the closet. Plus, I don't really want to... I don't have that much ink left in that bottle. I will have to go to the art store and buy a new bottle. And I didn't want to waste the ink by just, getting a bunch of it on the paintbrush just for that one or two splatters that I wanted. So here I'm doing the head. As you can see, that's what I was talking about. You see, I have a exact shape where the tail is, and then I have the shape where the head is. It's much easier to have the ink contained if it's not in all of the spaces. And also because of that, I can really, without having much shading, I can have it, distinguish that it's a head and there's a body, and I can put the darker parts where it would be natural to have shadows. It just gives me a little bit more control. The next step will be to have one big shape. We'll see how that goes. So now I'm doing the body, and you can see I'm dropping the lighter ink wash first, and it's the darkest ink wash I have right now on my palette. And I'm doing that first, and after that, I'm dropping in the the darkest ink. And I'm trying to blend that together. As you can see here, I overdid it a little bit. I thought it was way too much, but that's usually because I don't control exactly how much ink it gets into my paintbrush. I can be as delicate as I want, and it's still gonna soak in a ton. And that's even when I'm sometimes I will dip the brush in water, just so that when I dip it into the ink, it doesn't suck in as much. It works, but that's the only way I found to actually control a little bit how much ink I'm picking up, because my brushes suck the ink. Oh, it's so fast. But it's better, because at first when I did that, it shocked me. But now, because I can anticipate it, it's a little bit easier to control. So the next thing I've realized is that I had the shapes now, but they were too sharp for what I wanted to do with them. I mean, they look good, but I wanted them to blend in a little bit more into the background. I wanted it to be a little bit more inky, splattery, smoky, you name it. And so I'm actually being very, very courageous here, I believe. And I am I'm splattering with the bigger brush, with the biggest one I have laying around. And then if the splatters are not big enough, I'm actually connecting a few of the dots of the little splatters, because as you can see, I'm being very gentle. And because of that, I get really small, little tiny splatters, which is fine. Baby steps, okay? We're doing baby steps here. Here I messed up, so I'm trying to not really pick it up, but blend it in, because that was the ink that wasn't as diluted. The more concentrated the ink is, the of course harder it is to pick it up again. And that's why it's also very important for me to start working with just very diluted washes first, and then build it up, to build the intensity up. It's less courageous, more time consuming, but much safer for my skill level. So I've added those splatters, and now I'm coming back around the edges, around the cat, and adding another layer of the same thing I've done at the very beginning. I would have probably, and I'm hitting it immediately with the heat gun. I'm not even trying to leave it off camera. I often do that, and I'm just going to paint everything and wait and turn the camera off and then dry everything. Here I'm not even bothering, because I like the shape. I'm gonna dry it. And I would probably have done that first, before the very dark washes. But because I had the sketch made in a very, very, delicate pencil, it was starting to disappear under the initial washes. And so it was very hard for me to see what I was doing. So I figured, okay, the ink is not water soluble, so I will be able to paint on top of it. And it's more important for me to get the shapes, so that I don't have to then, draw them again or look for them. I liked the shape that I had. So I'm drying everything now. It's really hard to keep the tape down. It's a really bad tape when you're painting with a lot of water. If you're painting with less, it's working fine. It's much easier to get it off the paper. But if you're painting with a lot of water and with a lot of heat, you will need a good tape. I'm trying to say it because it's a lesson for me as well. And every time I'm painting like this, at this point it actually doesn't matter, but it might be a good thing to mention that every time you heat your paper, you want to let it cool down completely, because of course your paint is gonna dry instantly. I've done that mistake so many times that I've just started painting too soon after using a heat gun, and my paint wasn't behaving the way it should because it was drying too quickly. And one of the reasons why I'm actually using a foam board is because the wooden boards are keeping the heat much longer than foam boards. Foam boards are, cool almost immediately, whereas, the wood, and especially I use a bit thicker wood, and that just keeps the heat. Yeah, I really like my heat gun. It saves so much time. I think I've never ever remembered time when I did not use it, a hairdryer in the very beginning. Even when I was I couldn't understand why salt wouldn't work for my paintings. I remember using salt in the very, very beginning, baby Anita, age maybe, 16 or 17 or something like that. I just started, I got my first real watercolor set, And I saw this in a book somewhere that people were using, because there was no internet, at least in my house back then. And I saw people using salt with watercolors. And I thought it was genius. It was just genius. I wanted to do it. And I couldn't understand why it didn't work for me. Because I put it in the wash and then I dried it with the, with a hair dryer. And I was wondering why the salt was just like, it didn't want to get off the paper. And of course, eventually I realized it's because, I was heating it. I was heating the water and the salt, and the salt was dissolving. Yeah, baby Anita. Stories from baby Anita's life. So here I'm pretty much done with the washes, with the intensity. I'm very happy where I am right now. I thought as an added detail, I wanted to add some like fur around the darkest parts. Initially, I wanted to add them also on the lighter parts, just basically imitate what I've done on the Candy Witch, where she had that very fluffy tail. I wanted to do that here as well, and I might still do it on a different painting, but you guys know I have a problem with letting things go. I tell myself that I'm going to make a simple painting to save time, and then I just keep adding the details and detail after detail after detail. And so at this point, I'm really proud of myself for saying no. I'm just going to settle on something else because it's perfectly fine without it. I love it without it, so why add something? 90%, guys, always do 90%. So next time I'm just going to try and add the fur to the whole whatever that will be. Probably a cat, but definitely not today. And you can't imagine how actually happy I am because of that, because I've made that decision and I stuck to it, and I'm very happy with how the painting turned out. So now I'm adding the stars, and I really will buy white ink because I was thinking how nice it would be to actually splatter white ink to make the stars. Now I would still probably use a lot of gel pen because I like to place the stars where I want them to be, not whatever toothbrush or paintbrush I'm using to splatter wants them to be. But still, I thought at this point, I'm hitting the microphone, that it would be nice to have it, just the white ink, and I will buy it next time I'm at the art store. But gel pen works fine as well. So I'm adding a few stars, bigger dots, like hollow dots, like little circles, and to create more of an interest within my galaxy. And I'm pretty much done. I am so happy with this one. It looks a lot different than the previous cat, and that's the point. That's what I wanted to achieve, just to try different shapes. And I have to say, I like this one much better than the other one, just because it has that distinctive shape. I mean, don't get me wrong here, I'm not hating on the other one. I like it as well, but I like that this one has a shape. I like it better than the other one. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm already going to say it. I'm going to repeat this tomorrow as well, at the beginning of the video probably. I am not going to be recording a video for Sunday again, because day off like last week, it was very helpful. And so tomorrow will be a normal video and then Sunday off, because we have guests. But anyway, thank you so very much for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!